Hello.
Good evening.
Hi.
How are you?
Sorry I was late. I couldn't connect. I just had to use my phone.
Okay. You tried going through Blackboard?
Yeah, the thing is I'm not home right now, so that's why I had to use my
Oh,
phone.
okay. Okay.
Yeah.
No
But I did
problem.
start I started the PowerPoint. I haven't interviewed anybody yet, but I have like the first 5 slides done. Could I maybe send it to you to
Okay.
see if I'm on the
Yeah,
right
send
track?
it through email. Send it to email. And do you have someone lined up for the interview?
I think the only people that have
Okay.
really gotten back to me though are people that aren't necessarily in like the hotel industry. They're not
Okay.
like
What kind of business are they in?
they're more like chefs, I guess, like that kind of
Oh,
a
that's
thing. Like,
fine. Oh, that's food. That's
yeah,
food and beverage. Yeah, that's fine.
yeah. It's
Yeah,
just not
chefs are
really
food and
what I'm
beverage.
like.
That's fine.
Yeah, it's just not what I'm focusing on, really. Sorry, this bird is like going
No,
crazy.
what
I'm
are you
swinging.
focusing on again? What's your topic?
Wine. What did you say?
Oh,
Is
that's right.
a
Did you look
simile?
into Chateau Saint Michel in Napa
No,
Valley or any of those wineries?
I didn't. But I know that I should because Napa Valley is like a pretty good idea for like wine because they're really big on it.
Yeah.
I just don't really
The
know
other
what's
thing
like
is,
where to go.
the
Like
other
just
thing
look
is,
it
I
up
went
on
to
Google.
Trader Joe's. Yeah, I went to, no, go to Chateau Saint Michel's website. They're out west, but also Trader Joe's has a corporate sommelier, and I went to their website and it talked all about their classes and wine programs. So yeah, Google and start researching, and the farther you dig, the more you'll get into who to speak with. But the only reason why I suggested Chateau Saint Michel is their winery in Washington is it's huge, and they're reaching out. And Washington State wines are becoming very prominent, especially with all the fires and everything going on in California right now. And they have a beautiful facility where they do events. They actually have a concert hall in downtown Seattle area, and they support that with events and wines and things like that. So that's why I'm suggesting that.
Yeah, I think I'm
Okay,
just
well,
gonna Google sommeliers.
okay, that's fine. Trader Joe's sommeliers. I found them on the website. There's a couple right here in the local stores. Well, I'm going to go over the final project so we can review that so everyone we're still on the same page. All right, so the goal is for you guys to research and explore the hospitality industry. We're in an operations class. So operations is the backbone of any organization. You're the ones that are on the floor, out there in front, making sure that the guests are happy, the finances and the budgets are in line. But we've discussed different segments of the operations, and you guys are going to choose that segment that you wanted to be in. So you can research that. So on the handout that I emailed you, I gave you a couple websites just to look into it. So the goal is to interview someone that is related to your field, a mentor, an expert, or someone in that type of field. Um, then we said, in order to understand that field a little bit more thorough, you're to research the different job categories and job positions and put together some type of a org chart of the people that will be needed to in that operation that might directly report to you or someone in your department. Mm-hmm. Tonight we're going to talk more about finances, and so most companies will have a mission statement and a vision statement, and I said you need to research these because in order to move forward with a business plan or a strategic plan in a company, they always want to know the mission or the vision because that tells you what direction you're going and it keeps you on path and it guides you. This is our mission. This is our goal, whether it's to meet the obligations of the stakeholders, who are the people that are on the board, who are investors in the company, um, or it's customer oriented, or guest oriented. So whatever that mission or vision is, and that's what we were researching this week. And each organization has a value or an ethics strategy, And that's very important today, especially what's going on in America right now. What is the underlying philosophy of that organization? So that's something that you can include also in your in that slide. So tonight we're going to talk about the business plan. Now you're not going to write a whole budget. You're not going to do a whole profit and loss, a budget statement. What you're going to do is you're going to research the area. These are just some examples of slides that were used that are all considered resources. Finance, human resources, continued training, knowledge, learning, physical, meaning either the physical plant, the physical building, or uh, how things are operated, trucks, vehicles, et cetera, what's physical part of the operation, and the general organization. General organization is, we don't always see the backbone of administrative assistants, accountants, human resource generalists or specialists, those type of things. They're the backbone that keep the operation going. And so tonight we're going to talk about budget. So what you're going to do is I emailed out a basic P&L Excel spreadsheet. So for your slide, all you're going to do is point out some key areas that are operational, financial management areas you have to look at. So if it's front desk, for example, is it, what is involved with guest services? What is involved with employee relations? Is the concierge in your hotel more involved with front operations versus when I talked about Expedia and all these other corporations? So you're not going to do a whole hotel budget. You're going to take the area that you're focusing on and saying, these are the finances or that are going to be required. So we said it's either revenue or it's a cost expense. So you're more concerned about cost versus revenue, and we're going to discuss that tonight. So basically, you're just going to say, in my budget, here are some key expenses. In my budget, here's how we're going to generate some revenue. And tonight, I'm going to talk more about that so you have a better understanding tonight. And you guys will have classes on finance. So you're going to talk about profit, revenues, margins, things like that. So rate of return means when I spend so much money in marketing, when I spend so much money in labor, or I spend so much money in human resource, meaning hiring people, what's my return? I'm investing in people, I'm investing in equipment, I'm investing in marketing strategies, social media, and I have revenue and sales. What's my return on that investment? So you're going to measure that. If I'm doing social media, I'm going out into the industry and I'm paying for all these websites, how much business am I getting from that? And you're actually going to measure. There's people, that's all they do is analyze these type of rate of returns. So I might spend $500 in a social media website, but the responses and the bookings that I get generated $1,500 in revenue. So I'm getting 3 times my return. They base it on percentage of revenue and sale. Okay, ROE is rate of investment. All right. So and rate based on after you're paying shareholders, stockholders, and all of that. So we won't get into that. There's corporate finance people that do more of that, more operations. We're more line workers, line managers. And then your last slide is just an overview. If you're writing a business plan, it would be called an executive summary. An executive summary would be an overview of your research, your findings, your strategy, and just a summary of what your outcomes are, what you learned. And that is a personal view. You use some of the business strategies that we are discussing to include that, to so give you a better understanding of when you went out and spoke with people and you went out and did research, what you learned from that. Like when I discussed to you, being an industry expert in food and beverage operations, and I tell you, we operate on very close margins. And when we discussed how a very upscale fine dining restaurant in a hotel operation or establishment barely breaks even, I know it firsthand. I'm an industry expert. So these are things in your executive summary that you might say, that you learned that, well, I'm not going to necessarily go after the upscale dining clientele in my hotel. I'm going to be more family oriented, theme oriented. So we're going to have fun. type food items and things like that that could be high profitability. That's where your summary would, what it would be in reference to based on your research. Does anyone have any questions or comments based on the overview? This is what we're working on right now. Everyone feel like they're on point? Thelma, do you have a?
Yeah, yes, sir. Professor, I wanted to ask you, when you were discussing a while ago about the budget, you're talking about something, basically a hotel. But let's say you're doing, that's what I'm doing, like event planning. I would then basically do the same thing. I would look at what my expenses would be, and then do an overview of what the expenses versus investment versus intake.
Yeah, what you do is based on our lecture the last couple of weeks on food and beverage.
Right.
When we broke down catering and sales, as an event planner, first of all, you're going to want to know what your revenue is. So event planning is a little bit different. So you're going to know what your revenue is based on the events that you booked.
Okay.
And that's why I said catering and sales. Catering, sales, and hotels is very profitable because we book the event. Then we know what our expenses are, right? We know we need food. We know we need beverage. We know we need labor.
Yeah,
then we need to determine what our equipment is, right?
Right.
So our revenue drives our expenses in catering and sales, and that's why it's so profitable. So in event planning, what I would do is say, this is the number of events I would want to do in a year, and this is the gross revenue. So you base it on average plate, average, cost per person, or average revenue or sale per person.
Okay.
Does that help you?
Yes, I'm actually writing. Just give me a second.
Yeah. So a lot of that would go back to the last couple of weeks lectures when we talked about catering and sales and banquets.
Yes,
because you're not going to hire servers just to stand around, right? Like you would have to do in a restaurant.
So it would be based on what events I have. So, and it would be based on need.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
So your labor is driven that way. So you can drive your percentage of variable expenses, which we're going to talk about more tonight. Remember variable expenses fluctuate with revenue. Based on my food sales, I need more food. Based on my liquor, I got to buy more liquor. Based on my labor, I have to hire more employees. So catering sales, you have more control because you're going to say, well,
you can.
I'm going to hire one server per 15 guests.
Right.
I'm going to hire one bartender per 100 guests, right? Hopefully it's a good bartender.
Right, I was about to say.
Yeah. All right, so.
There I go.
Kurt?
I said, here I am, I got you.
Yeah, was that number way off? Serving one bartender per 100 people?
I would probably want 2 or 3, depending on if they're heavy drinkers.
So one per 50, maybe? 1 per 50?
Yeah, 1 per 50.
Okay. Yeah, if it's a straight bar, not all those fancy drinks.
We're not a bunch of fishermen in the Keys.
Yeah, that's true. You have to keep them lined up. All right, so let's talk about.
Hold on. I'm sorry. When you say one bartender per 50, so that's mean 50 at the same time, or 50 for like in a time period, like for like 5 or 6 hours.
So Sherilyn, what you do is when you're doing events and functions, you plan your staff, your servers, your bartenders based on the number of people.
Yes.
You base it on the type of service and the type of drinks. Open bar, cash bar, your clientele, and this is actually planned. And when I was in Kauai, we planned events. When we said we had local people, we would say, all right, plan right out, 8 Heinekens per person.
Okay.
They're staying in the hotel, right? They can't go anywhere. They're not driving, etc. So you would plan that, or you would say, we've got a church group coming in. They have a bar. You're going to go 1 to 2 drinks per person.
Okay.
As Kurt said, you got a group of fishermen. They're going to be lining them up and knocking them down. They're on a boat. You're on a yacht. It's captive audience. Now you got to be careful of alcohol poisoning, over serving, all that, but it's not going to be like you have to worry about 2 drinks per person because they're going to get in a car and drive, that kind of thing. So you're a little more lenient when it's on a captive yacht, a boat, a ship, a resort, an island, something like that. And you have to go by your company protocols and things like that. So when
All
you're
right.
doing your scheduling for the event, you want to make money. So you want to keep and you want your bartenders and your servers to make money because it's based on gratuity. The more servers or bartenders you hire, the least their tip pool or their tip is based on gratuity, not pool, based on gratuity, 20%, 18%. But you also want to make sure the guests are served. And what Kurt was trying to say was, hey, don't put me in the weeds, make sure I make enough money, schedule enough people. And that's up to us as the operations manager. And I would go and talk to my lead bartenders and we would discuss it before we booked the event. What do you think? And they would tell me straight out, this is what they're going to drink. We've done this before, this type of group, this is what they're going to order, and that kind of thing. And that's how you base your revenue and your labor and costs on an event. Same with alcohol. I'd say how many cases, they would always tell me local Hawaiians drink Heineken. That's their imported beer. Naturally, they all drink Bud Light and your local, American Budweisers and things like that. But their import was always Heineken. Where I could get a group in from California that it was longboard or something else. Well, those are more expensive. So now my bar cost is going to go up, right? So I have to charge them more on my BEO.
Okay.
Or you get a group where you're going to do a lot of mixed drinks. So that means I need another bartender. And we would set it up that way. And you'd break it down. So we would do the 26-mile run, the Holo Grill 26-mile run. And we would determine how many bars we would need and how many bartenders. And you break it down. There's 26,000 people there. And you have to break it down on the number of bars and where they're serviced and how many bartenders and that kind of stuff. So that all goes into the event planning. But the question that Thelma was asking, how do I determine my budget? Well, events and catering, you're going to determine that year, and we're going to discuss it. I'm going to pull up a slide. Your budget is based year over year. You do an annual budget. And the annual budget is based on revenue. And then from that revenue, you have to have expenses, cost of operating. But then we break it down into a 6-month period, a monthly period, a weekly period, and a day. So you can break it all down into exact measurement so you can control it. Well, let me pull up the slides and we'll go through.
So basically speaking, sir, what
ahead,
we'll have to do each function, well, I usually keep a record, but
yeah,
when you're having a large function like that, especially like a hotel, it is incumbent on the persons within the different departments to make sure they take note of what was served, how it was served, how much was consumed, how much corkage, and then next year, if you're having the same function, you go back to your paperwork and see what you can modify or if you need to cut back on something.
No, that's exactly right on. That is so important for event planners, catering, sales. People get so lackadaisical. Think of how easy your job would be if you have an annual event, like we talked about some of the events, Comic-Con in California. I'm not sure of the events here yet, but think of sporting events that are in your hotel. Every year, if you have the same group and you're taking excellent notes every year, you know exactly what your revenue is. So when you go to do your budget, that's called forecasting, which I'm going to pull a slide up to go over with you guys. Your forecasting is based on history. So Thelma, what you're explaining is history. I'm going back to my history. I have every year I have a regular event. I know exactly what that revenue is. Now, if we're trying to build business 1 to 2% on the revenue, the general manager has to look in the hotel and say, where is it going to be? Is it going to be in the food and beverage, catering sales, rooms division? Well, if you come as a catering sales or a sales manager to the GM and you pull out your forecast based on excellent notes that you had, and you're always 1 to 2% every year within budget, you're going to get the reputation to be one of the best operation managers there are. And keeping excellent notes, what they're drinking, how much they're consuming. It's all very important. And you could simply, when you print out your BEOs, have attachments and summaries. I used to staple all the I used to make copies of all the bar tabs and bar receipts and staple them all together. So I had electronic files, but I also had paper files. And I kept only certain files for a certain period of time. And if I had year after year events, which we all have in our operations, those are the ones that I really kept, good forecast, because we're building revenue from that. Let me pull up this first slide. It's going to be on hotel rooms division. That's not the one I want, but let me get into the other one. Okay, so let's go. We got to do hotel pricing first. So we were talking about the beverage side of it, food and beverage. So in food and beverage, depending on events and catering sales, it's based on the events and the number of people. Then we do our labor based on the labor we need, based on the size of the group. The menu determines the food budget. The alcohol determines the alcohol budget. The operations, whether it's on property or off property, determines our expense. Do we need equipment? Do we have to rent equipment? All those come into play. And my thought was, when I booked an event, I charged the customer for plate rental, glass rental. I just didn't go out and rent things and say, well, I need to do that. Eventually, I bought my own china, my own cups and glasses, but I still charged a plate rental. So that's all revenue. Now, that's on the food and beverage side. So a restaurant would be different, because restaurant, you would have to write the menu. You have overhead. You'd have walk-in guests, so you have to schedule servers. And your variable expense would vary with the sales. But how do we do hotel and rooms division? Okay. So we've talked about rooms division, the front end. We've talked about the social media aspects of that. So basically, what is our demand? What type of hotel are we? What kind of operation? We discussed that. Are we a theme hotel? Are we a resort? Are we a signature name brand? In other words, we're on the side of the highway and people stop in when they're traveling. So we may not have to offer all these extra services, because we know that we're booked at night, but during the day we have no guests because we're on a highway. So what kind of operation are you? So the price is set based on market. So market would be, who are my competitors? Who are hotels around me? If I'm a Marriott, do I have a corporate price structure? Do I have a rewards plan? Hilton, Marriott rewards plan, those type of things. So all this has to take into consideration to know your operation in order to your budget and to determine your rate. So we talked about franchises. So franchising at corporate hotels, if you're a corporation like Marriott or Hilton, your room rate will be determined by the corporate. Now you'll help with the budget. You'll put the budget and strategy and plan together, but your budget has to be approved by different levels of management. So the ultimate final yes would be the corporate headquarters. So you may say, I want to do room rates at $75. I know my market. And the company may come back and say, well, you're not really making the margin we want. We want a 1 to 2% growth in margin this year. So we want you to charge $100 a room. So that's where you get the push and shove comes back and forth with you being the operations manager at that hotel. You may say, people aren't going to pay that rate. And these are the reasons why they won't pay that rate. A company's not going to dig in and hold their ground if you can justify and prove that, you have to have a good presentation, but you can justify that people aren't going to pay that amount. We don't offer enough services. Our competitors aren't charging that amount. We're an older hotel and our competitor only charges $75. If you've got a good legitimate argument and present that, a lot of times your headquarters will listen to you because you're the person on the ground, your operations. Okay. And that's a pricing strategy. And it's, you know, it'll say it's a matter of science and art. To me, it's a matter of experience. Knowing your market, know your clientele, and knowing how to manage good budgets, and knowing your supervisors in your corporate office. A lot of times, I wouldn't show all my cards. I would always hold something back, so I would always make budget. And you know, you guys are going to learn this as you get more into operations. You know, in other words, I would always show, you know, my certain events and certain things that were going on, but I might have something that was on the back burner that they didn't book or they didn't sign, that wasn't in my budget, and it wasn't like I was holding things out. I just didn't really show my cards until it all came to fruition, and that automatically helped me make budget. You know, you have to know who you report to. You know, a lot of people say there's a scientific component to budgeting. There's not. Who would have forecasted COVID? Who would forecast all the hurricanes this year? Who would have forecasted tornadoes in the Midwest, fires in California? Think of all those hotels, resorts, and properties that are losing business right now. So how can you say that's a science? So it's room rate. And they're trying to say that there's a yield software that you can use that will help you with a scientific formula of developing a budget or strategy. Every corporation has their own software system that you're going to have to work and use within that company. And we talked about online booking. So what they're saying is that their strategy will only allow for certain different price structures. So the yield strategy would say, okay, we're only going to allow 5 different price structures based on social media. And these price structures are going to go to hotel.com, Priceline, Expedia, Travelocity. These are the different price structures. These are the 5 companies we're going to work with online booking in this strategy. We can't go any higher or any lower than this price structure. So you have to forecast that. You can't just say, well, we're going to, you know, guess and base it on this. So forecast is history, right? Part of it is history. History and knowing your market and knowing, like we talked about, weather patterns, you know, things like that. It's all part of forecast, which we'll talk about when we get into budget. So what this is saying is there's disadvantages because more intermediaries are growing in volume. So who would have thought Vacation by Rental would have popped up? And what's the other big company? Like Vacation by Rental, what's the other big company like that? We lease people's homes?
Airbnb.
Airbnb, thanks for, yeah, Airbnb. So who would have forecasted that? So what happened was these companies came out and started taking away from the hotel industry, and they blindsided them. They didn't know this was going to happen. And so now Marriott, Hilton, and all these other companies, they're trying to become players. Marriott's really pushing that type of business now, which that's totally against their strategy if you look at their traditional corporate structure. So how would we have forecasted that in the hotel industry? We would not have. And a lot of those laws, when I was in San Diego, local residents were complaining about Airbnb. People were coming in and, you know, partying and tearing up the homes, but they're ruining the atmosphere of that neighborhood that was family oriented or a peaceful, quiet neighborhood. So a lot of people pushed back. So a lot of cities had to catch up with that. And you're seeing a lot of hotel organizations sitting on a lot of these committees and all these boards to push back so they can get their business and the revenue back. So we talked about creative pricing. Now, where would you start? From all the lectures we talked about in hotel, what would be some of your costs? What are costs associated with selling a hotel room? Who can answer that? Who's going to be in the rooms division in the hotel end?
Housekeeping is a cost.
Housekeeping?
Yeah, reservation is a cost.
Reservations. Okay, what else?
Front desk is a cost.
Front desk.
Um, Maintenance is a cost.
Okay.
So you'd have to factor all of those in when you're pricing your room.
Okay, so basically,
Even the kitchen.
that wouldn't be part of the room's sales though. So what you're looking at, remember, Charlene, we're separating everything out. So we're going by division. So
Oh, okay.
the room is revenue. So what expenses cost you to run the room? You have to clean the room. That's housekeeping. You have to maintain the room. That's maintenance. We have to book and sell the room, reservations. So anything that's associated with the room, the reason why we have to know what our bottom line expense is in order to know how to come up with a price of selling the room. We don't want to lose money. So we have to take all this into consideration when we're doing the budget. What does it cost for me to sell a room? If I was to break even, what's my cost? And that you have to know that. If you don't know that, how are you going to tell all these social media and booking companies what price to sell the room at? So if you know your cost, then you know what your profit is, because you know what you can sell the room at a rate, and that rate that you sell it at minus cost is going to tell you what your margin is. Your margin is your revenue after expenses, right? So who else is in there? Andrea, you're in rooms division, right? Is that what you're looking into? She must have left the meeting. Zhao Chen, you said you wanted to go in the rooms division. You did an
Yes,
interview. So does that all make sense to you?
that makes total sense. Yes.
Okay. So in order for us to understand how to do our budget for rooms division, we have to know what it costs to sell the room. And we have to take everything into consideration. Okay, so then there's the human resource aspect. So the human resource aspect will be front desk, who's selling, who's booking, who's all involved with that. So we have to figure all that out. And
Like
you
even
know,
like the guest services too.
the guess what?
The guest services as well.
Well, it depends on what the guest services are. Food and beverage would be
Okay.
food and beverage. But if we have a turn down service and it's done by housekeeping, yes. We'd have to determine who's stocking the mini bars. If housekeeping is stocking the mini bars for food and beverage, then they have to share the labor. So there's got to be internal transfer of labor there. A lot of different
Okay.
things that you have to look at. You know, if you're doing newspapers, if you're doing water was a big deal. That was a big issue I had to push back as the director of food and beverage, because I was ordering all the water. It was coming off of my expenses, but the rooms division wanted the revenue for the water because they're placing it in the rooms. Well, we had to push back who was getting the revenue. Eventually, we shared the revenue, but that's a gray area. But that area is really not going to be an expense for you to determine how much to sell the room for. Your bottom line costs are really what it's going to cost to maintain and operate the room. If you think of that, then you're going to know what your cost is. I have to air condition the room, energy, all those different things. So
Okay.
that's when our next lecture, when I go through budgeting, we're going to talk about fixed and variable expenses. And if you always remember, variable expenses means they fluctuate with sales. If I have sales, I have to order more product, or I need more services. If I don't have sales, I cut back on my product, I cut back on my services. Okay, so then you have your corporate pricing structure. So you have corporate clients. So you might have one of your software companies, Sony, Pixel, any of your top companies that they travel a lot, so they have a corporate rate with your company. And this mostly is not negotiated at the local level. This is negotiated at the corporate office. A corporate rate is set, and this is done by corporate sales. You have a whole team of people at corporate offices. All they do is sign contracts with major manufacturers, software companies, big companies. When I was with Campbell's and Ocean Spray, we had contracts, so you get discount rates. So again, you're not going, even the company office has to know what that bottom line cost is to sell that room. So they're not going to sell your room in a loss. Now, if you see the corporation, you're an operations manager at a local property, and you see the corporation selling a room at a very low margin or a margin where you're not making any profits and it's tying up your room, well, that's where during budget processing time, you push back. You're saying you're tying up my rooms. I can't block them for major events. You're basically giving them away. This is not, we either get credit on our budget for that, but that's where a good operations manager will look at and know their budget and their strategy. And that's why you have to understand this, because you're working with a lot of different moving pieces in the hospitality industry. Yeah, so your budget economy properties are, low budget. They want to take care of the guests. Luxury hotels, we want all the sundries to go with it. We want the fine dining. We want everything to go, just like MGM Grand. They have everything in there. Brand recognition, we talked about that. Most people are going to stay at a top name brand hotel because they know what to expect. Chain restaurants, and that's where you have your membership reward plans. What is your strategy? Tactics mean, who's going to sell the rooms. So part of your budget's going to be my sales force and my sales manager, who of course was part of the executive team. They have to put a whole strategy together themselves. That means they have to tell the executive committee when the budget plan comes around, well, what are you going to do for corporate strategy? Are you going to book so many events that are blocking rooms selling food and beverage? And what rates are you going to sell those rooms at? Right? So what is the tactic and execution? How are we going to market that? How are we going to, measure that? At the end, measurement means we took the sales team, we blocked the rooms, we sold the rooms. At the end of the year, when the next budget year is coming up, we have to measure that. What was our margin? What was our profit? What if we booked all those rooms and did all the food and beverage and end up losing money or not making the money that we thought? We didn't book any events in the banquet facilities. We thought people were going to go to the restaurants and use all the other venues, and they did not do that. Well, that was a poor strategy, where you could have locked them in with a contract selling the banquets and events, where they had to guarantee a rate, they had to guarantee a dollar amount, and they had to guarantee a number of people to eat at that event. These are all strategies and tactics that have to be reviewed and looked at in the strategy of the hotel. Elasticity, when you talk about elasticity in micro and macroeconomics, that means who can pay what the economy is at the time. So right now, there is no, really in the hotel division right now, there is no elasticity because of COVID, where people are trying not to stay in hotels, or if they do have to, negotiating the best rate that they can get. So a hotel or a corporation right now does not have the power to set prices. So we have to go based on the market. There is no elasticity basically right now in the market. That's what it means. End the slideshow. I'm going to go to the next one. Any questions on hotel pricing? For some of you that are in the rooms division, that are going to be doing the front end. All right, so let's talk in general about budget and forecast. So for your project, you guys have to highlight revenue areas and costs.
What's like the general information you want us to say?
You're on mute. We can't hear you.
Professor, you've muted your speaker.
Okay, so for a wine sommelier, your goal is to sell wine. So you're gonna have to say, what's my sales strategy, my sales force? You have to say, what is it going to cost me per bottle? Well, each bottle is going to cost you a different price. So you'll have to say, what price structure do I want to be in? Because your price structure determines what you sell the bottle of wine for, but that's going to tell you who your end user is, who your consumer is. So if I know people have a lot of money, they're going to pay for a lot of expensive wines. If I know the average consumer can afford $8 to $12 a bottle, then I'm going to go for high volume. I'm going to sell a lot of bottles. So you have to determine where your price structure is, your sales force, all that's your labor, right? How much you're paying for the bottle of wine. If you're working with a distributor, or let's say you want to be an independent sommelier working for someone selling their product, how are you going to ship the product? How it's going to be distributed? A lot of your companies now are doing wine clubs. That's huge right now because everyone's at home. So they're mailing the wine through the mail. What are the state rules and regulations? Many years ago, you couldn't mail any alcohol through the mail. So what are the rules on that? So look at your structure and what you're trying to do. If you're a sommelier and you want to be a sommelier in a hotel, who's your staff? Sommeliers in hotels are still responsible for the wine list, the wine inventory. My sommelier, when I was at Gaylord's in Kauai, he was buying the most high-end bottles of wine. He had the most expensive wine room on the island, $150,000 worth of wine, and he weren't selling wine. He had the lowest margin of sales. He didn't know his clientele. He should have had a price range on the island of $30 to $40. He would have moved a lot of wine. He was selling bottles. He was trying to sell them for 100 plus. Well, you'd sell one or two during a night, but his margin, being on an island, you're gonna pay more for wine. It's a bottle. You could have gone to the grocery store and bought it for $8, but in a restaurant, you're gonna pay 40. So he didn't have the right clientele, the right margin. So when you do your research, that's what you have to understand. Am I going to be a sommelier out in the market working for a winery? Am I going to be a sommelier working for Trader Joe's or retail? Am I going to be a sommelier in a hotel? A sommelier in a hotel is responsible for all the wine purchasing and all the wine budget and the wine room. So your wine budget, when you present it to the food and beverage manager, you're going to have, this is what I'm going to buy in wines this year. This is what my wine inventory is going to hold. This is what I estimate I'm going to sell of wines. And for you, it's going to be a little more difficult because you're going to go, this is Reds import, Reds domestic, Reds California, Reds Washington State. You have to break it down. And that way, not for the general manager. The general manager just wants to know, this is our wine sales. But for the food and beverage director, you're going to have to break it down because they want to know when they're writing menus or what's your banquet wine list look like. Your banquet wine list won't look anything like your restaurant wine list. So these are all things when you research a sommelier, it's not as easy as you think. You got to research and look into it. $150,000 on a restaurant wine. It's not a lot for New York, Miami, Chicago, Boston, all these LA, these big cities. But when you're on a little island that probably only has 50 restaurants, $150,000 is way out of reach. Does that make sense, Alexandra? Alexandra?
Yeah, I got it.
You
I'm good now.
understand? You understand like the segments of what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
There's a good
I'm not
sommelier in a
sure how to
hotel.
like.
Pardon?
Mhm.
I think the first
Thank
thing
you.
is you have to determine where you want to be a sommelier so you can research that. You know, because it's
Yeah,
sommelier.
I'm not really sure about that, to be honest.
Yeah, sommelier is the wine expert. Take a hotel. I mean, you can talk to somebody in a hotel right now, local property, and go in and ask them to tour the wine room, tour their inventory. It's going to open your eyes. It's a huge position, a lot of money, a lot of inventory. Some of these, I'll guarantee some of these restaurants here in Palm Beach will have a bottle of $20,000, $30,000 wine, one bottle. They'll have a bottle of scotch on hand for that. So, okay,
I have
so
one more question.
sure.
I have a Mac. Is that going to be okay? Like Keynote?
A
Can I
Mac
send that to you?
computer? A Mac computer, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Okay.
Um, that's why I'm having you guys do this project, because I don't think you realize how much money. They said just here in Palm Beach County with COVID, we're going to lose like $3 to $4 billion. And I totally believe it. This area is one of the most traveled areas in the world. Miami, Palm Beach, people from all over the world come here to stay, to vacation, timeshare, live 6 months out of the year, finest chefs, food, wine, restaurants, resorts, Disney, Orlando, you know. And so when you research the projects, you're going to learn there's so many different venues. I've worked with some of the top sommeliers in the world, and it's amazing what they know about wine, but they're also responsible for huge wine lists. Okay, so we talk about operations. We're operations managers. You have to know your numbers. I've been stressing this to you guys. Budget is how you know your numbers. Now, we have an annual budget. A budget is done year to year, date to date. But that doesn't mean you have to break the budget down to 6 months and to monthly. Do budgets change? Can anyone answer that for me? Would your budget change?
Yes, I would say based on my interview, the manager told me they have budget for every little thing, everything.
Yeah, and budgets would change. So
Yes.
when COVID happened, the first thing they did, I guarantee they had emergency meetings. Where are we going to cut costs? We have no revenue. Variable expenses. We stop buying food, stop buying liquor. We need to furlough. All this is part of that. I mean, it's not a fun time when you're furloughing or laying off people. The hardest hotels to manage are the ones that are losing money. Anyone would love to be in a hotel that's making all kinds of money, the guests are happy, the staff is happy, but that's what the budget is about. The budget is a moving document. The budget has to change based on sales and revenue and cost. All right, so one of my lectures, I told you all that executive managers are paid incentives based on revenue, sales, and budget. So you could make an additional $50, $75, $100,000 a year just in sales incentives through a corporation. So they're based on quarterly. So a good executive chef, catering sales, sales manager, it depends on the general manager of the operation who all are based on the incentive plan. But usually it's the key managers, the key line managers. So the lowest line manager would be like a restaurant manager, an executive chef, banquet chef, maybe a sous chef. But usually the reason why it's a banquet chef, because banquet chef, that person works 7 days a week, nonstop. Every banquet or event that's sold, that person is there. So in order to keep that person in that position, they give them a percentage of either revenue, sales, or controlling expenses. And the expenses, that depends on the GM. A lot of places will say if you hold the food costs at a certain rate, A lot of places say labor. And so it's divided equally, and it depends on the corporation. And I will tell all of you, every company that I have been in, there is an incentive plan for all managers in hotel operations. So it behooves you as a student to learn as much as you can about budgeting, forecast, and cost control, because one day if you become a very good operations manager, it could be financially lucrative for you. So sales would be sales incentive. Executive compensation and bonuses is usually based on the overall operation of the hotel. And there's a lot of key points. It could be Marriott has a gold star standard. So where is your review with that? It could be customer service response. It could be revenue growth. The company wants you to grow 1 to 2%. You come in 3, they're going to pay you a bonus based on that 1%. Now, how much the bonus is what you negotiate with the company. So incentives, capital expenditure is a bonus. That's for like people that are capital expenses, major expenses like construction, architecture, building, things like that. So that could mean many things. It could mean that you're keeping utilities, air conditioning in line. It could be that you went out and bought all these properties for the company to expand new hotel, and you got a good price, and you've expanded so many hotels. That could be a corporate expense. Or you're keeping your capital expenses down. You're not buying major equipment for the hotel. You didn't have to replace air conditioning units or kitchen equipment or things like that. So the major difference of forecast and budget is viewed as a process. In other words, the budget is a constant moving document. A forecast, when Thelma said earlier, do we keep good records? You keep good records for your forecast. Your forecast, I always say history, history, history. If you don't know the history of what happened, and someone that does a good forecast, for example, we talked about one year when they had the baseball strike. And I always use this as an example for my students because I lived in outside of Phoenix in Scottsdale, Arizona, and the baseball strike went on at that time, and we had the Diamondbacks. And what I remember is that all the restaurants and the bars, everything around that time, they started to lose money, go broke, go bankrupt, and things like that. So those hotels at that time would mark in their forecast, whatever year it was, baseball players strike, revenue went down, and then they would say how much. So this year, think of 2020, man, all the forecasts are going to say COVID, no sales, everything. And next year, when they come to do forecasting, people are going to be like, COVID, oh my God, that was like the worst year for, that. So it's history. In the Northeast, it'd be winter snowstorms. It could be right now in California, our hotel or resort was closed because of the fires. So all that is history in the books. So the following year, you're going to say, well, we're not going to have fires, and we're going to get all this business back. So that's going to change. So long-range budget is based on your strategic plan. Strategic plan is when all the executive managers get together, they go over mission, vision statement, what the vision is, how much we're going to grow that year, what's the strategic plan, are we going to change? Strategic plan could be we're implementing a new dining restaurant, we're implementing a new grab and go concept. It could be we're adding a new wing of rooms to a hotel. It could be we're adding a new suite of rooms that are no longer 1 and 2 guest rooms. It's going to be a living suite. So what is your strategic plan, long range goal for that operation? And the strategic plan usually there's a 3, 5, and 10-year strategic plan. So the 3-year strategic plan year over year would be what capital expenses do I need? So if I'm going to say we're going to build all these big suites and hotels and resorts, you're not going to budget for that for 1 year. You're going to have to base it on 3 years revenue. So you'll say our strategic plan is we're going to take a certain percent of our profits every year for the next 3 years, put it into a separate account that's going to be used to build these new wings of the hotel. And that's what it means by your capital expense for that strategic plan. Does everyone understand that? So in other
Yes.
words, if you're an executive manager and you want to buy something, a capital expense, and you didn't budget for it, unless it's an emergency, the company's going to say no because you didn't budget for it, you didn't plan for it. So let's say the chef comes back and says, oh man, I want all this new equipment. I really wanted it. Well, the food and beverage director is going to go back. Why wasn't it in this year's budget? Oh, I didn't think of it. I didn't get around to it. Well, maybe you'll get around to it next year. That's what will happen. Unless it's an emergency where you didn't plan for it and a dish machine blows out. But usually there's a line item for that. There's a line item that they'll be for emergency funds. And they'll take a certain percentage of all the revenue and they put it in there. So when something like that happens, air conditioning units go, major equipment goes, you pull from that budget line. Okay. This is just a case study. Okay, forecast techniques, more than one techniques. 40% of the restaurant and beverage departments favored to use the number of guests expected by spending per guest. So basically, it's what we've been talking about. You want to determine what your occupancy rate is. For a restaurant, you're going to determine a daily, weekly, evening sale. So you're going to have a budget for breakfast, a budget for lunch, a budget for dinner. You're going to base it on 7 days if that's your operation.
Professor, you did not change your slides, you know.
Pardon, Thelma?
You didn't change your slides. You're still having it up a thing.
Results and discussion. You see it?
No, I'm still looking at hotel pricing. I don't know why.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on.
Oh, okay. But I'm using I'm on my Kindle. I'm really reading from my Kindle, so I'm following you on my.
Okay. You guys see it now? Seeing it? Are you guys seeing this now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So this is what I've been talking about. Okay, forecast. This is where I was right here. Okay, so we talked about rooms, how you determine that. We talked about banquets and events. So basically a restaurant, it's a little more difficult. You have to break it down per meal period. You have to take an average of what you think your sales are going to be, or if you have history. We know if a hotel has a certain occupancy rate, our restaurants, each meal period, we know exactly how many guests from the hotel will eat in the restaurant. Then we have to determine how many walk-in guests we have. So basically what we're saying is how many times a seat is filled or occupied in the restaurant and how many times we turn that. It's called a restaurant turn. So for breakfast, we usually do 1.5. Lunch, we do maybe 1.5 to 2. And dinner, we'll do a 2 turn. So if you have a 50-seat restaurant and you're doing 1.5, that means you're doing 150 guests. So then you base that on where the guests are coming from. So your forecast will tell you from history how many are from the rooms. So we might say we have 100% room occupancy rate in the hotel, we know from experience that 60% of our guests that stay in the hotel eat breakfast. We know that 10 to 15% of our guests eat lunch. We know that 40 to 50% of our guests eat dinner. So this is all based on history, from revenue, from sales, which you get off our point of sales system. That's, let's say, that's just straight booking with no conference, convention, or you're not into a district where you have sporting events, music, entertainment, conference, you know, you're a hotel that's in the conference convention center area, your forecast will increase. So that is how you determine your history of forecast for a restaurant. You have to do each meal period based on the number of guests, based on the term. Now it gets even more difficult because you have to determine the average revenue, which is the average plate sold. You have to do that by meal period. So you have to determine from your point of sales, because you'll have history from your point of sales, what your average check is per person per meal period. So now you know the number of people you're forecasting per meal period based on each day and what the average check is. So you're going to figure your daily, weekly, monthly, annually revenue based on meal period. And you do the same for lunch and dinner. So that gives you an annual budgeted revenue for that time period. That's why it's very important to have good point of sales. Your point of sales is going to tell you the average check. The average check is based on the meal mix, the meal plan. How many steaks am I selling? How much pasta am I selling? Each one has a different price point. So the fact that it has a different price point, you have to have an average check. That average check is going to help you determine what your sales are going to be, and that's how you manage it. So once you manage what your revenue is for that year, you have to determine how much am I going to pay in labor, how much am I going to pay in food, liquor, equipment, supplies, paper supplies. So the restaurants are very difficult to budget, but with modern computer systems and point of sale systems, you get more accurate result. So when Thelma said we really need to keep really good records, here's a good example. If you're a really good restaurant manager, you have what we used to call them captain's books or a log book. It's a manager's book that you keep per shift. And it's actually handwritten. You can use computer, you know, you could set up a system where everyone types in notes and it's shared. So the log book would say, here's what happened, date and time, this meal period, number of guests, any walk-ins, party of 10, or, you know, we had a main water break outside the hotel. No one could get to the restaurant. All that kind of information is kept in the captain's book or the log book, whatever your establishment calls it. And so when it comes to budget time, all you do is pull up all these notes from each night, each lunch, each breakfast, and you go back and say, well, this was an unusual circumstance. We can budget a little bit more in revenue. And that's what good notes are used for forecasting future.
So, Professor,
Yeah.
so you're saying that, but what would the logbook would then do individual sales or what do they say, an average?
No, the
So
point
you
of
would
sales,
do,
the POS system, the point of sale system would keep all your records.
right.
So
So
let's
when
say,
you're logging it in the book, what would then be logged? You will log, let's say you say on the 23rd of September you did 10 steak, you had a party, you
no,
have
because
5 parties. How would you break that down?
you wouldn't break down the menu of food, what you sold.
Okay.
The point of sale system would do that. So here's what
Right.
you would do. You'd say, I'm the evening shift manager.
Mm-hmm.
So-and-so is the evening bar manager. So-and-so is the bar supervisor.
Right.
We have reservations, and you would post how many. Then you would let the night happen. You would say, it could be something really simple. Everything was smooth, everything was great. Nothing happened, that kind of thing.
Okay.
End of, log, journal. But then you could have a night where we had walk-in guests from 20, the restaurant next door closed, had an emergency. We had a
Okay.
walk-in
Oh,
guest from
stuff like
20
that.
to
Okay.
30. Yeah. We had a winter snowstorm. All guests, a hotel, locked in, couldn't go anywhere, leave property, 100% room occupancy. We sold, if it's a 100-room hotel, we sold 100 to 150 meals. Anything that is used for your forecast for future reference. Or it could be so-and-so had a guest notified me they thought they got food poisoning.
Okay.
Then you would put in the logbook the guest name, the number of the guest,
Like
and
an
then you would
incident
fill
report.
out. Yeah, then you would fill out an incident report.
Uh-huh.
Incident report would go to the front desk supervisor who would get it to the appropriate managers. But in your logbook, the food and beverage director can go back and see who the shift supervisor was, who the restaurant manager was, who the chef was, any detail that you would put, things like that.
Okay.
Believe
So-
me, they're very important because they don't blindside the next manager the next day.
So at the end of okay, your point of sale, the point of sale would keep the records for a whole year, or you download it and keep it on a file?
You can download the point of sale
Each day.
information.
You close off?
Yeah, I used to have, you call them Z reports. At the end of the night, you run a report, and you tell the computer what the report is.
Okay.
So you would run reports that accounting would want because it has to go to the night auditor.
Night auditor.
Basically, that's your sales, your revenue, etc. Then you would run Z reports. We call them Z reports because the old registers, you had to Z them out. They actually had to run a system where you heard them printing out the paper all night. So you would run a report that would tell you the number of sales, revenue, bar sales, etc.
Okay.
And that's and it would say the number of cash pay, Visa, American Express, MasterCard, number of guests. It would also break it down bar sales. So you'd have bar sales. Yeah, we broke it down even farther. We had beer sales, bar sales, wine sales. You could tell the computer whatever you wanted.
Oh, that's good. So
you could set it up so every manager, you didn't have to put the information in. Every manager that got an ID for that restaurant and had to do a Z report, you would set the computer up so every manager consistently had that report.
Okay.
So then what I do is I make copies of the report and keep a separate file. So not only is it electronic, but I have a paper copy.
Right, paper
But
trail.
then when you go to do your forecast, you can
go
look
back
and
to
say,
that,
okay,
that sale.
if you needed to, you could say
Okay.
our average sales that night are 10 grand.
Okay.
Liquor and food together, 10 grand. One night we did 30 grand. Now you're doing your forecast like, wow, I need to go back and do some research. Why did we do 30 grand that night? Well, the restaurant across the street closed. They had an emergency. We got all the walk-in business.
So that's where the log would that's where the log would help you then. You would then be able to go back on that day log and figure out, okay, all right.
Right. Because when you go to do the forecast next year, you're not going to budget that dollar amount.
That
You're not
30, right.
Put in your forecast.
You would go back to the 10.
we're gonna
You would
do-
go back to, you would use the 30, you would go back to the 10. Okay.
That's
okay.
exactly right.
Right.
Because you throw the 30 in and you don't hit it at the end of the week or the month. Because you actually do monthly reports for the F&B. And I did weekly banquets and sales because I had to turn them in the GM. Because if we're not hitting our mark, when do you correct it? When do you fix it? Not at the end of the year, right? It's like when you have a banquet cancel and they didn't pay the 72, or you had a banquet cancel and you never got the deposit, but we put it in the budget. So we have to readjust our budget. When we readjust the budget, it doesn't mean we say, oh, it goes away and forget about it. We readjust the budget and say, we need to make this up somehow. Where are we going to make this up? What are we going to sell? What are we going to advertise? Where are we going to cut back? That's how you manage a budget.
Okay, good. Gotcha.
Good questions, though. Very good questions. Anyone else? Everyone's starting to get an idea why operations managers, I say, know your numbers? Any questions or comments, anyone?
But that makes your night auditor extremely important.
Well, the night auditor really just collects all the data, and he's or she is a person that inputs the information.
Right.
But they can only input the information that's
Of
given.
what you have, what you give them.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So what happens is the night auditor posts the sales. They'll post room sales. If they're individual restaurant sales, each individual restaurant will have an ID or number that goes like a folio. Remember we said a folio? That'll post. Any events or banquets will post. If you have an event that has their own folio number, that'll post. So when I print out a report that goes to the night auditor at that night, if I have an event and it has a separate folio, that revenue is on there.
Okay.
If I have, you know, and then it goes to the night auditor. Now, if I had an event and it didn't post, or the food and beverage manager at that time didn't bill the person and they didn't go in the point of sale system and ring it up through that folio number, the next day you would get an email from accounting. So-and-so F&B did not post event. We need those numbers right away.
Okay.
Because everybody wants to know the daily revenue.
So the next morning when you come in, the property manager would then have an idea of what happened the day before.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And you could take it one step farther. Many corporations are tied into your local
Oh, yes,
property.
that's true.
Yeah, so they can see the sales.
See the sales, yeah.
Big Brother is always watching. That's the age of computers.
Okay.
And they're watching who's posting correctly, because I constantly had to be on food and beverage managers that were not posting. You know, they'd blow off posting. They didn't get out till 2 in the morning and they wouldn't post on the folio. Well, the night auditors usually start at 11 or 12 p.m. and they work till 3 or 4 or 5, 6 in the morning until the AM shift comes in. They post. And those numbers are very important, because we may have budgeted for an event and we said it's a cash bar. And we budgeted for that cash bar to be 10 grand and no one drank for that event. They came in at 3. Well, how are we going to make up those sales? You know, it all adds up towards the end of the month, end of the 6 months, end of the year. You can't just come in at the end of the year and miss your forecast. The company wants you to grow by 1 to 2 and you're under 3. That means you're 5% under what you forecasted for the corporation. And that's not good. It's not acceptable for most companies. You always got to be 1 to 2%. That's why I always held something close to the vest to make sure I had something to fall back on. I mean, you can't lie, you can't hide, you can't cheat. But I didn't always tell them things that I had on the back burner that could have bailed me out or wasn't finalized or we're still working on. You know, you don't always say, because if you say we have this huge golf outing coming in, it's going to generate a couple $100,000. That's all they're going to talk about at corporate. They're going to keep calling you every day wondering why it wasn't sold or isn't booked yet. So you keep certain things to the vest until it's all finalized. Make sense?
Perfect.
Okay. Well, I'd like to hear some comments from you guys on budgeting and revenue and costs. I've talked enough, I think, tonight.
Well, I mean, only that it sounds like a pretty stressful job to keep on top of those numbers all day long, I can imagine. And
well, you know, Kurt, you're right, but to me, it's always about proper planning. If you keep good records, you generate the right reports out of the point of sale system, and you're on top of things, planning always helps out. You know, so if you're laissez-faire and lackadaisical when you're planning and forecasting and writing the budget from the start, you're going to have a bad year. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So I think you really have, and you have to train your managers. You're not doing it alone. That's why you surround yourself with the best team. You tell them what is expected. You use the computer to the fullest. If I didn't know how to use something in the computer, I went out and I told my salespeople or whoever owned that computer, I have a contract with you. I'm paying a couple $100,000 a year. I want your people out here. I want them helping me program the computer. I want them to be here doing sales training, meetings with my staff. And when you go to buy your system or you go to book your system, they'll do that. Or if you're taking over as a new manager in a company, you're going to ask, what type of point of sale system do we have? What's our contract look like? Is there training in the contract? Is there all these different things that are going to help you? So what I could say to you, Kirk, is use all the tools to your advantage and really strategize and plan ahead. That's why I'm trying to teach all of you that to be successful in our business, you have to know your numbers. Now, if you're a good manager and a good person, Kurt, you said you want to be a GM someday, and you're a good operations person, you know the numbers, you'll be very successful. And good GMs are financially lucrative, but you see the bonus plans that could happen. Any other questions, comments? Anyone? Is it all starting to come together? Are you guys seeing the light? Or are you still?
Yeah, it's starting to make a lot more. I mean, you're painting a very clear picture. To me, at least, I'm starting to see what it's like.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to paint a clear picture. The more I departmentalize, the more you guys understand.
Me too. I'm starting to understand it more.
Yeah, good. And your interview, Sherilyn, that helped a lot too, didn't it?
Exactly. I have so many clues and so many points there. It's really it's helping me.
Yeah, and that's why I'm telling you guys, you're hearing it from me, so you're not going to interview me because you're hearing it from me. I want you to hear from other people that are actually in the industry what I'm telling you.
Yes, I remember last class you were talking about not the laissez-faire, the other one, the authoritarian.
Autocratic, yeah, autocratic.
Yes, the approach. When I asked him that, he said it's not the best option.
He's right.
So
yeah, he's right.
oh, he's right.
Yeah, but what we used it as example was like we said, an emergency kind of procedure.
Okay.
You're in a situation where it's very stressful, and you have to get something done, and there's too much chaos and confusion, and no one's taking leadership. That's where we used it as an example.
Exactly. I think just a minute. Let me go through my notes.
I gotta move.
It's like they don't like the micromanagement, he said.
No, that's where delegation. Remember I talked about delegating?
Yes.
I said delegate to your staff and empower them.
Yes.
But you can only delegate and empower people that you trust. So you have, in order to empower and delegate, basically someone gives you a responsibility or a task that the end results fall on you. You have to tell them what's expected, what you want, set the parameters, and empower.
Okay.
But micromanaging would mean if I empower that person and they don't come through for me and they fail,
sure.
Well, what do you do? Where do you go from there? So that's why some people have become micromanagers. Some people are micromanagers just out of insecurity. But last week when we were talking, Kirk said basically you're going to manage people differently based on their personalities, and that was a good observation. You're not going to handle everybody the same. Some people, I had people that you had to write everything down that you want. You had to make an exact list and hand it to them, and they would get it done. But to say to them, I need you to do these things by this certain period of time, they wouldn't know where to begin. But when you hand them that list, they'll get it done. So some people, I'm not going to say you have to micromanage them, but some people you have to handle differently.
Okay, handle differently. Okay.
I mean, you have to get to know the personality. Some people you're not going to empower.
Okay.
The hotel operation is very big. Not everyone's going to be a supervisor. Not everyone's going to be a leader. Everyone has a certain job or a task that they have to be in. Some people, they're happy with that. Some people will tell you straight out, I don't want any responsibility. I don't want to think. I want to come in, do my task, you know, whatever that task is, and I want to go home. So,
Okay.
what
Thank you.
other observation did you learn from the interview that you did? What else
Oh,
as far as
I learned
leadership style?
because it's based on what he was saying, it's mostly like he gave me more detail, but you gave us like the key point of each, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I learned about the 5 stars hotel. He said based on the structure, some hotels they are four stars, but if they were like place or the structures were different, they would have been 5 star. And then
Well, what he's talking about is five-star rating. You have your diamond rating, and
yes,
you have your AAA rating. There's
yes,
many factors that they base it on. So
exactly.
you could, at one of my hotels when I was very young food and beverage director, we only got 4-star 5 diamond because we didn't have laundry chutes. They kept the linen outside on the carpet, so it wore the carpet out. So when he says
Wow.
hotel structure, it could be the design, the layout, but they're looking
Yes,
at everything, not just food service. They're looking at front desk, concierge,
yes, yes. He said
training.
even the
So there's a whole
lobby,
checklist to go by.
everything has to fall into a category in order to have those diamonds, like to be 5 star. And he said also you can lose one of your stars if when they audit you, if
Yeah,
something is going wrong, like you have constant complaint, bad service,
yeah.
you can lose one of your stars.
A good example is Breakers Hotel. Breakers for years was 5-star, #1 hotel, and they
Mm,
lost a star. I don't know if they ever gained it back, but it made more media that they lost the star, and most people didn't know for 10 to 15 years straight they were 5 stars, you know, and to lose that star made more publicity.
oh, okay. And also he said something like the SOP, standard operation procedure. He
Hmm.
didn't really give me, a full detail of it.
Well, a lot of your hotels have what's called the actual position is director of operations,
Okay.
and this class is operations. So standard operating procedure would be anything the hotel would say is a normal procedure, normal day-to-day operation. It's standardized, so it depends on the operation of the hotel.
Okay.
Some things are like just common sense that you know a daily operation that happens in a hotel. Standard operating procedure. You got to check in a guest. You have to take a reservation. You know, those kind of things are standard operating procedures.
Okay, that's really
And it
cool.
varies from hotel. So being in the industry for many years, standard operating procedure for me in food and beverage would be, I know how a restaurant operates. I know how a banquets and function operates. Anything outside of that norm is not standard operating procedure. And that's why I'm trying to teach you guys operations in a hotel. That's what the class is about. These are standard things. It doesn't matter what company you're at. We know as a hotel group, whether you're at Starwood, Hilton, Marriott, Four Seasons, which is a Marriott property. These are all what we do is a standard. And all hotels now have a director of operations, meaning the F&B, rooms division manager, all the line managers will report to a director of operations.
Okay. And also he stated the same thing like you've been saying in order to buy a hotel, like he said, like when you build an hotel, it's too much. It takes too much for you. It's gonna be like a long time investment. It's too much to handle. It's better when you buy your one of the chain.
Yeah,
When
I
you buy it like this, it's better
yeah,
for you to grow up with the company. And
that's
I
right.
didn't
My
surprise because I remember you said that.
yeah, my whole career I've never built a hotel from ground up, but I've remodeled them, redesigned them, and
Yeah, that's what he said.
yeah, you guys will never see that because it's not in our, it's not, that's not operations. If you're building a hotel, you're gonna have an architect that's gonna design it. The architect's gonna hire a contractor. They may ask you,
Hmm.
as a chef or food and beverage person to design the kitchen or things like that, but that's even rare. They don't even ask that input.
My last question to you, why he said, because when I asked him, based on you know, the amount of time that he has working in the industry, if he's not happy about something, what will be the change? He said the change will be to improve housekeeping. I said, in how? He said the salary, because housekeeping, hold on, housekeeping, just a minute. Yeah, the you know, like this dishwasher, kitchen people and housekeepers are the engine of the industry, but they are the one that get paid less. Do you have like
It
any?
goes, it goes back to the argument of hourly wages. So a lot of states are trying to increase the hourly rate for quick service workers. So a lot of your housekeepers are making basic minimum wage rates. So what he's saying is a lot of people used to do quick service or certain jobs and position to get through uh, high school, college, or anything in quick service. Well, now these positions are actually jobs. People are taking them to feed their families, to make a living. So all these quick service restaurants now have to review what they're paying hourly. So they're being paid minimum wage. Same with housekeeping. A lot of housekeepers used to be part-time jobs. They were working full-time jobs elsewhere, and they did these jobs to gain income. So a lot of your housekeeping jobs were international, minority positions, and he's saying that they're not being paid enough. And that is true across the board for
Yeah.
all hospitality. That's the biggest argument right now is increasing minimum wage for hospitality. I know in California they had it's up to $19 an hour now, and before a certain, I think it was this year, the end was supposed to be 20 some odd dollars. That was minimum wage. One of the highest in the
Okay,
country.
because I was surprised because what I told him, I said probably because they know housekeepers they have tape. He said no, it's in restaurant is like that, but
It
in
is.
hotel it's not like that. The guest is not entitled to leave tapes, so you cannot base, you know, the payment of housekeeper because like, you know, the fact that they're gonna receive tape, it's not like that. And I was like, wow, I have to, you know, tell you that. What is it
Yeah,
about?
and it's well, that's the argument too now because a lot of your restaurants now are quick service type restaurants. They're not formal restaurants, so they don't. It's like we discussed in other classes. We're talking about menu design and do you hire an experienced skilled chef or do you hire just to cook and get more prepared foods? And so that's the argument. Where are you going to be as far as the design of the menu? The more complicated and the more high end the restaurant, the higher labor you have to pay for skilled chefs. So that's why a lot of these restaurants are paying less. And even in hotels now, you're not seeing the high end restaurants anymore in hotels. They're bistros, microbrews, grills, and so they're hourly waged like a quick service employee would be. So, and he's right. It's a hotel could not operate without. Think of it. You had no room cleaning, room
True. It would
turnover.
have been a mess. And then you're gonna have to be like constantly apologize to the customers or give them contemporary or stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, when
Okay.
you and I meet Friday morning on the Zoom call, these are some of
Yes.
the key points that you want to put in your presentation when you finalize your
Thank
presentation to the
you.
class.
I would
And that's the key
appreciate
points
that.
in the summary. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm gonna check the calendar if I have anything for Friday, and then
If not, we
we'll
can
do that.
schedule it Monday if you don't.
No, the sooner the better.
Yeah. But you got a lot of good information. Any
Thank
other
you.
Any
Yes,
other questions and comments from anyone before we log out?
thanks.
The PowerPoint is due next Wednesday, right?
Well, we've been trying to turn in PowerPoints slides as we're going along, but week 6, I wanted as much as you could have done so you can start presenting to the class. Even if you don't have a final presentation done, if you have enough information to talk and present, just like Sherilyn and I just talked right now, that's enough right now if that's all you have for week 6. I just want you guys to share what you have with the class because you learn from that. Just that short period of time, Sherilyn and I were conversing, look how much you learned. Or when Thelma and I conversed, look how much you guys learned from that. Any other questions, comments, or anything? All right, well, you guys have a good evening and continue working on your projects. A lot of good discussion.
Thank you. Have a good one, y'all.
All right.
Bye.
Have a
Thank
good night.
you. Have a nice weekend.
You too.